Hi, everybody. Welcome to the new normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Litecoin Lisa. I have a treat for you today. Dr. McDaniel did a video, and I was listening to it while I was preparing and working on my office. And it's got a lot of great information. It's new information to me, and it actually goes hand in hand with some of what we're getting ready to do after our current book study. We're going to jump into a raw food cleanse with Amy Weir, Bix Weir from Road to Ruta, his wife. And she and her daughter are doing the book study with me and my daughter on Mondays here on the show. You guys can join us if you're watching this now. A book study about boundaries. Anyway, back to Dr. McDaniel, and he starts talking about sugar and the effects of sugar on our body. Then he starts talking about this study they did with cats and raw food. And I got to tell you, it's pretty incredible and really gave me a lot of motivation to push myself and um, engage because I think we all want better health to have better quality of life. So you guys listen to this and let's learn together. There's a link in the description where you can order your subscription for New Eden or contact Dr. McDaniel, and you can learn more about New Eden products there. You can also exchange energy with me and make a donation to support the channel or join my Patreon in the link in the description below. So we'll be right back right after we hear a word from Dr. McDaniel.
Meet again on the subject of the power of more comprehensive nutrition. And I'd like to stress again the importance that there is no activity humans have that are more personal and more in your control to practice your liberty and freedom in regard to what you eat, your choices, and the amount you eat. Also, one of the reasons so much time is being spent on this is try to inform you so that you will know the incredible power that is endowed in our genetic code that controls cellular synthesis of how amino acids, fatty acids, sugar units or saccharides, vitamins, minerals, elements, and plant phytonutrients are hooked together in cellular synthesis under the control of the genes to make bioactive molecules that run the normal biochemistry and physiology of life. And I'll repeatedly emphasize normal because it's against federal law for anything other than a FDA-approved prescription drug to treat, cure, or mitigate disease or syndromes or correct an abnormal health condition. All we're talking about is normal or comprehensive nutrition to support the biochemistry and physiology of the body. And you knowing this is important because we have a brain between our ears of each one of us, and its function is the mind. And the mind controls through the nervous system and hormones and possibly other factors we don't even know about, everything in the human body. So what you think and believe and know is extremely important. And if you understand the power of more optimal nutrition, I call this translation into daily living is personal, preventive, and interventional health management. And in this day of runaway inflation, governments interfering more and more with personal activities and choices, this becomes increasingly important as the family's finances, the personal finances of being able to prevent disease, to support the recovery of deviations from health, which I will note in this at one point, is in the preamble to the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 94, which in the preamble states that science and medicine has observed and proven that optimal nutrition is essential for good health, to prevent disease, and to restore health. You might immediately ask, well, what more would you want? Well, I can tell you exactly what you'd want. You would like for that statement to be in the law and not in the preamble, which is not the law. But we'll proceed further with this presentation that I call the Pottinger cat experiment. And it's about the importance of having raw food in your diet that is not deteriorated by cooking, which introduces oxidation into all nutrient molecules, which is accelerated rancidity. Everyone knows what rancid butter or rancid peanut butter or mayonnaise is. Well, that's oxidation in this 21% oxygen atmosphere, and heat increases that rate. And bioactive molecules are more active when they are raw and are kept away from heat. So we'll proceed to the PowerPoint presentation now. This first slide, you will see some green, and that's the emphasis of this lecture. Raw food, and I emphasize it supports normal biochemistry of life. And again, normal again is emphasized. And we will start out at saying that my email is capital R McDaniel at wellnessquest.org. And if you have questions that arise from these lectures, I will do my best to respond to any email you send to me. And I also have some material that I can send to you that addresses personal issues that you find that you want some response to. I'll do my best. Now, I want to start out by talking about freeze drying. That's where you put a substance in a vessel or container, which is at freezing temperature, and you put a vacuum on it to remove the water. When you remove water, all moisture, the natural potentials of these complex natural molecules are preserved. What do we mean? This was developed in the 1930s to preserve enzyme bioactivity, removing the water in the cold. And they also then found that the bioactivity of compounds of life that are used in biochemical research, this bioactivity was preserved. And of course, biochemical research or molecular biology is how do living cells work. And it was found long ago that individual plant cells and animal cells have very similar biochemical metabolic activities. And freeze drying was developed onto a commercial scale to produce plant-made nutrient molecules or phytonutrients, ingredients for dietary supplement formulations. The plant powders or biological activity are preserved and can enter into normal biochemistry of life processes. The phytonutrients and other nutrient molecules have a critical metabolic structure that imparts metabolic activity that is produced by the assembly of nutrient molecules in cellular synthesis. And of course, this cellular synthesis is controlled by genes, and it's a DNA nucleic acid code written in 4 complex molecules: adenine for A, cytosine for C, guanine for G, and T for thymidine, that in chains are a instructional code for organelles of the assembly line that's present in every cell. Every cell is like a tiny ultramicroscopic factory, and depending on which gene is activated, of the 30,000 genes, that is the bioactive compound that's made that conducts the normal biochemistry of life. And I emphasize again, normal, not treated. You should know that the DNA code made by these 4 nucleic acids is far more powerful than computer code in computers like desktops, laptops, and cell phones. In this session, we will emphasize the importance of maintaining enzyme bioactivity that is in nutrient molecules. This was experience I'm going to share with you, show how nutrients are devitalized by heat in our 21% oxygen atmosphere. And this impacts the animal health as demonstrated by cats that are omnivorous mammals, because humans are not only eat meat, but vegetables, and cats will do much of the same. And their metabolism is greatly alike. And also these experiments done by Dr. Potter, was his name, from the Potter Price Foundation, was the first to exhibit the phenomenon of epigenetics. In what I will share with you, the genes in group A cats and the genes in group B cats are identical. The difference is the marked difference that group A has raw food and group B has thoroughly cooked food. Now, there is a remarkable parallel in the similarity of biochemical cascades in all animal cells, and there are some differences too. It should be known that the DNA in plant cells, the nucleic acid in plant cells, is identical to the DNA in animal and human cells. This is a challenge for anyone that has the attitude that all life, plant and animal, just came about by totally inanimate or no properties of life molecules, just getting excited and deciding to get organized and establish life. If there was some type of intelligence that developed plant cells, why do it all over again? And the DNA or the code in plant cells control its activity is identical to that of animals and humans. And I might add that the trend is to do more research on cell cultures of animal organ cells rather than the intact living cells. If you've been following the research on animals, there's a growing appreciation for the emotional and mental life that is present in what was once thought totally stupid or dumb animals. They're far from dumb. And the current issue of National Geographic goes into this a little further than it's been done in the past. And a plant like a tree or a human being has trillions of cells that have to function in harmony. And the cell cultures can mimic some of the biochemistry, but they cannot encompass all the complexity of the human condition. We'll go to the next slide. Now, this is the book called Pottinger's Cats that is in the Price Pottinger Foundation out of California. And I want to refer you to, if you go to that website, they have a DVD about this research that I found not only very informative, but chilling in regard to the lack of understanding of the power of nutrition that is absent in our population. Now, Dr. Price was a dentist, and he has been regarded by those that follow him as the Charles Darwin of nutrition. And he was born in Canada, and he did extensive research for the Dental Association of Canada and the United States. And he became, by his findings in nutrition, virtually an evangelist, and skeptics really attacked him for his devotion and research done on the importance of nutrition in human health. He wrote books, and he developed a belief that a lot of disease came from teeth without pulp in them, or they were devitalized, a source for toxicities of the body and poor health. That also the tonsils were important in this, and they should be healthy. And he developed endodontia, or root canal procedures, and he received a lot of criticism. But Dr. Price was a pioneer in dental work and the use of radiology and x-rays on oral structure of teeth and jaws, and we see the years that he lived at the bottom. Important about his role at the Price Pottenger Foundation, as a young dentist in the 1920s and 30s, he must have been from a family of some substance, because he took a world tour once he got his dental degree, and he collected over 15,000 photographs of the oral status of third world populations that were pre-industrial. Then after retirement as a dentist, he went on a second world tour, and from that he developed pictures that he believed proved that the adoption of Western diets in these previously undeveloped countries was deleterious to the dental and jaw health of these people. And he wrote a book in 1939, Nutrition and Physical Deterioration, the relationship between diet, that he pointed out that Western governments and nonprofits and religious organizations brought Western diets into these third world countries, and it was deleterious. The source of his information was in Switzerland and Native American tribes. He went into Polynesia and African groups, Australian Aboriginals, and he initially showed the normal dentition and the lack of caries, particularly, and normal relationship between the mandible and the maxilla in these indigenous populations on their basic natural diets. And in his second trip, he was able to show that by adoption of Western diets, that you saw bone deformities of the skull, and the teeth had no room for properly being developed, and there were rampant caries in the tooths. And for all of this, in his book, in his conclusion, he was attacked vigorously by multiple sources. And of course, that's kind of a modern parallel to many things that goes on in this day. He believed that processed wheat flour that beat in sugarcane sweetener, and all processed fruits, vegetables, and meats and vegetable oils were deleterious to health. And in modern research, his targeting the sucrose that is from cane and beet extract of the sweetener has been shown that he was in, well, shall we say, knew what he was talking about, because the molecule of sucrose, that is table sugar from cane and beets, is a disaccharide that combines glucose attached to another sugar, fructose. And that glucose, in experiments done in the modern era, are non-diabetogenic. They do not elevate the blood glucose in individuals that are fed large amounts of glucose. If you give them sucrose, which is a combination of glucose and fructose, you find it's mildly diabetogenic, moderate at most. And this is done by not only blood glucose levels, but by insulin and pre-insulin forming compounds to follow the diabetic influence. But fructose alone given to human being is very diabetogenic and will induce poor glucose control and insulin resistance and damage to the endothelial cells in the retina of the eye and the brain and the heart and the kidneys. And fructose is very deleterious, and there's a lot of current public protests about pure corn source fructose, which is the absolute cheapest sweetener that's available commercial for different companies to put in all types of food that is processed food, is very diabetogenic. We're going to emphasize in this thing that cooking in the 21% atmosphere of oxygen accelerates oxidation, or the oxygen molecule attaching to molecules. And this oxidation, you know more about than you think you do, because if you don't eat it, you just keep it around, a mayonnaise or natural butter or peanut butter becomes rancid, and that's the natural attachment of oxygen molecules from the 21% atmosphere. And this type of process goes on inside our body, but with the beautiful design and function of life, the genes make molecules that reverse oxidation and turn and contribute electrons back to make it in a reduced form. And that's what is present in raw food, is it's not oxidized, and we'll proceed further. Now, Dr. Pottinger was a general surgeon in the pre-antibiotic period, and this was a treacherous era for surgeons because they violated by cutting through the skin, which is its number one role is to protect all the cells and fluids and compounds in the body from infection. And during the pre-antibiotic era, and particularly prolonged surgical procedures or major surgicals, death just due from surgery and the infection that was produced was significant. Well, Dr. Pottinger observed in his practice that there were patients that before the surgery, in his examination, everything that he could detect, all looked identical. However, after surgery, they could divide it into two groups. Now, one group recuperated, healed rapidly with no complications. Now, this is what surgeons want. And I worked for decades with surgeons, and they see themselves as kind of like a knight in shining armor with their banner held high, and they come in and people are in pain or disability. they correct the problem, and they ride off into the sunset a hero. That's what surgeons want. No complications. Now, the group 2 were a surgeon's nightmare. It's something they hate to see. Multiple problems. The wounds came apart before they went into the skin. It's called dehiscence. The sutures don't hold and heal. Infections spread not only topically, but even locally into the blood to be septicemia. They develop post-surgical adhesions or fibrous bands. They had either bulging, hypertrophic, or very weak hernia scars when they did invasion of the chest and abdomen. These patients recovered poorly from the anesthesia, which is a toxic assault on the body to paralyze and put the mind at rest while the surgeon does his work. Also, from anesthesia, you can have a bowel that doesn't wake up after surgery. It's called ileus. And there are a lot of problems from ileus of suppression of fluid in the segments, and the peristalsis is not restored. The lungs can develop pneumonia, and there can be progressive disabilities, even deaths, from patients that look before surgery just identical to group 1. But Dr. Pottinger was challenged by these 2 groups, and in very detailed examination of them, he decided he believed it was due to the pre-surgical nutrition of the patients, determine whether they're in group 1 or group 2. And he decided he would do research to look into this, and that's what's called the history of Pottinger's cats. Now, he did a 10-year research program between 1932 and 1942. He set up 2 identical cat colony enclosures with shelter and an open run penned so they could get outside. Group A colony had everything they eat was raw, just as it would find in nature. Group B cats had everything they eat was really cooked well and processed by heat. Over the decades, multiple different permutations of the diet were given to Group B, which we'll go into a little more later. Well, bottom line was Group B cats died out in the 3rd to 4th generations due to progressive poor health by more members of the colony. Group A multiplied until he had too many cats on his hands. In the permutations of the diet, he found out ultimately that 50% of the food by the cats in Group B were raw, that the cats, being a carnivorous model, prospered just like the Group A cats that had totally raw. In other words, Group B, if 50% of their intake was raw and unoxidized by heat, that the cats prospered and reproduced and were healthy. We'll go into some details of this. Now, Group A had 2/3 raw meat, 1/3 raw cow's milk, plus cod liver oil. Group B had 2/3 absolutely totally cooked meat, heated and pasteurized milk, but also cod liver oil to add to their diet, fatty oils. And the big difference was the raw meat and milk and the cooked meat and heated milk. The 2 groups of cats initially were physically evaluated and put through a performance task, and they were, as far as I could tell, they were identical. One of the things they did with the cats is they weighed them, measured them, They would take them up in the air at different positions and drop them for 6 feet and see if they could twist around and land on their feet, which a good cat in good health can do. They recorded the nature of their fur, their eyes, their teeth, and mouth membranes. And before they started this, they were all within normal range for both Group A and Group B, just like his surgical patients that led to doing this experiment. Now, in the Group A, he fed them liver, brain, tripe, sweetbreads, heart, skeletal, and smooth muscles. And the cats propagated had litters. They followed their size of not only the cats, but of their litters. And they all were considered normal cats. And the offspring of these cats was an average of 119 grams. Now, of the cooked meat and cooked heated milk group that initially started out looking identical, just like the surgical patients, very rapidly they became sterile and they became hostile to handling, and they were hostile to each other. They noticed aberrant sexual activity. They became reduced in size. The animals, they had scruffy fur, unhealthy mouth, gums, and teeth. Their bones were longer and smaller in diameter. The bones were rubbery compared to Group A thing, and they had more fractures. Their offspring of their litters were 19 grams less than the raw food cats. In other words, they were smaller, little litter cats. They had more deformities. And as we said before, Group A multiplied, were in good health, got too many cats eventually. By the third and fourth generation, the cats were having a shorter lifespan. They had spontaneous abortions, stillbirths, sterile colony died out. And the incidence of genetic deformities increased with each generation. And I put an asterisk at these deformities because in our own personal experience at Carrington Laboratories and at International Dietary Supplement Company for 10 years, we had a veterinarian breeder with 100 female greyhounds that he raised greyhounds for the dog racing tracks. He added the aloes manning to their basic diets of these 100 female greyhounds, and he reported he eliminated runts in the litter, which had been common. He eliminated genetic deformities of all forms, and the incidence of neonatal deaths just disappeared. The animals, baby animals, grew faster. They were easier to train, and they found out they were particularly calm because the greyhounds, by their nature, were pretty nervous and easily upset by travel in the way you have to travel from track to track. And in fact, the greyhounds that developed were faster racers. They could set new records for the distance they were running. Well, that's with these greyhounds reported by this veterinary breeder. But it's an interesting story that we had anecdotal reports that I received as director for a dietary supplement company that this was repeated in racehorses, and that in Canada, I met with a coach up there that he had Olympian sprinter females, and that they broke records by adding this oligosaccharide to their diet. And then in addition, he was a consultant to a group of males in their 35, 45 age range in Ottawa that had been Olympians or World Cup competitors. And he was amazed that at the age of 35 to 45, they were breaking records they set when they were 18 to 21. Then, before it was over with, I was the medical director for Manna Relief Ministries, and unsolicited, we got reports that not only did children with chronic malaria quit having fever, chills, and red cell destruction and began to grow again, got out of bed, and went back to school, but that they, in time, we got reports, again, unsolicited, that they exceeded in athletic performance with soccer with the other kids. So this is a recurrent observation anecdotally. Now, in addition, they took this cats, and they took this Greek bee cats, and they used canned condensed milk, and they used canned condensed milk with sucrose from sugarcane or beet added as a fermentation of their diets. And they're doing this, they found out that sucrose was not desirable, and that diabetes developed especially sooner in this group B cats if sucrose was added to canned milk. His conclusions about all his tests was that raw food is 40 to 50% of the diet, which would be food as it occurs in nature's, that these carnivorous cats will have good health from generation to generation, just like the group A cats that got totally uncooked food. And so the lesson to each of us is that we should have salads and raw fruit and vegetables as much as possible to try to make a significant amount of our diet is uncooked food. Now, after the study was done with these cats, he still had the cat colony pens, which were about 12 by 6 by 7 feet. And they had a fenced runway underneath the covered area, which kept them from bad weather. And in the future years, when they no longer had cats, they noted that the weeds were reduced in the number and even in the weeds size in the group B cat colony sheltered run. And there was florid, intense weed growth in the group A shelters, where the cats' urine and feces would go into the run, and the plants benefited from the group A diets more than the group D. They went even further and they plowed this ground, and they put grass seed in it, and even this cultivated growth was significantly better in the ground where the group A cats lived compared to the plants that grew in the group B run cats. The story is that cooking of food oxidizes or destroys, and that oxidize, for your common understanding, is more like rancid, the oxygen attaching to the molecules, that this oxidation destroys complex organic nutrient molecules, not even only for the cats, but even for plants. And that the complex molecular structure of natural vitamins and nutrients are superior to the cooking in our atmospheric of 21% atmosphere. And when you oxidize a molecule, it is no longer an electron donor, and that's a feature of natural vitamins and nutrient molecules. I recommend to you the Price Pottenger Foundation video, and they present this history that I have been sharing with you. And not only Pottinger's experience, but Dr. Price's, but the video comes to, after telling you all this, to a final conclusion and commentary that I found a measure of chilling reality. What do I mean? They say, and I quote from the DVD, the American typical diet is resulting in the human population's health following the same path as the group B cooked food cats. And why did I say this was a chilling reality? When I was a young doctor, there were no fertility clinics or medical specialists in this field. In fact, females feared getting pregnant too easy, but that's changed. And if you notice, that was one of the first things in group B cats as they became sterile. That's why the colonies died out. Over these years, I've heard of fertility clinic failures. I think of a couple in Canada that went to 2 fertility clinics. They were a little older than the average couple, and they just could not get pregnant. However, they adopted this more comprehensive nutrition built around the oligosaccharides nutrients, and lo and behold, they had a twin boy and twin girl, and I can't tell you how happy and proud they were. We had examples of individuals that had been going to fertility sterile clinics where the male had sperm counts that were just too low to induce a pregnancy, and that with more comprehensive nutrition built around the oligosaccharides, or the ingredients that are in New Eden, the sperm counts came up to normal levels and a pregnancy event occurred. Very happy couples. I shared with you that nutrition improved not only physical performance and athletics, but one of the biggest files I have on my computer is the improvement in academics, that even the function biochemistry of the brain is improved by more comprehensive nutrition as provided by the ingredients that are in New Eden that I put together with these 36 years of experience. I might add, the reason this file on academics is so large is it is opposed by the agenda of the educational establishment. And there were multiple studies that some of them got published that rather than it would take significantly more tax money for multiple reasons that they would use it, that just by almost insignificant improvement in the nutritional content of children, that their grades and their behavior improved in a manner that was a threat to the education establishment, who said there's not going to be an improvement till we get more money. When I was an early physician, I was a hospital-based physician, and we would have 1 or 2 patients in the hospital in the 1960s that were diabetics being followed to try to improve their health and problems from type 2 diabetes. By the time I retired, and 30 years later, we had 2 techs coming in at 5 o'clock in the morning to start drawing blood on the multiple diabetics. We might have 10 to 20 in the hospital, because when the doctors made rounds at say 8 or 9 o'clock, they wouldn't want to know what the AM glucose was to write the orders for their insulin and other diabetic pharmaceuticals. So we went from virtually no diabetics in the hospital to so many we had to bring in new technicians very early in the morning. Also, when I was in training, I will never forget, I had a patient that had an autoimmune disease, lupus. And the chief resident said, get that case prepared and present it to all the other students before the week's over at our review, because you may never see another case of lupus again. Well, what has happened over the years? Nearly everybody knows someone with lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or hypothyroidism due to autoantibody disease, which are the most common ones. And what has happened during this time? We've plowed up more gardens, chopped down more orchards. And I would say the chain that you see down in nearly every metropolis, French fried fast food has exploded, and that has increased in our diets, like the type B cats getting totally cooked food. Another thing that I have observed since the years that I've been a physician, that in the early years, there was no instance, nobody in the clinic, no, not in the lectures or in the textbooks, anything about attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity syndrome. However, now it's on the covers of magazines, and it's virtually a national youth epidemic. And I mention this because we were astounded when in Chicago a study was done in a group of about 41 children that had ADD, ADHD, in just microscopic amounts of more comprehensive nutrition. These children's academic performance and behaviors markedly improved. So the legacy is that we have a lot to learn from Dr. Pottinger and Dr. Price, and that's why their foundation in California exists, to try to educate the public the importance of raw food in the diet. And they had the experience, they want to share Dr. Pottinger's experience that through epigenetic influence of the diet, because the group A and the group B cats had identical genes. What the difference was, even both of them got cod liver oil, but the difference was the amount of cooked food they ate and its effect on genetic activity, on cellular synthesis, and the quality of life of the individual. And you can learn from this in regard to your personal diet for yourself and your family, and particularly your children. I might add that the truth of Dr. Pottinger's research, that he received hell on earth because the sickness industry, a lot of people don't know that Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance plans will not provide a fee to a health professional unless you can prove there is sickness by either x-rays, by lab work, or unquestionable examination. You got to have a disease present to be remunerated and paid for your professional activity. And that's why some people say it's not a health industry or profession in the United States, it's a sickness industry. Sure, cats are not humans, but there's so much similarity to the biochemistry of animals, and particularly cats and human beings. And there is a book called The China Study by a PhD author, Dr. Campbell, the biggest nutritional study that's ever been done that was funded as a cooperation between China and the United States, and that the importance of the rice that we point out as ingredients and also raw food elevates health. I won't go into it, but I was present at a program from a retired FDA farmer individual life career, and he gave the evidence that the recommended daily allowances or recommendations in diet are not based on scientific data, but just on a premise that Americans are the best nutrition people in the world. They have nutrition so good that obesity is a problem. And it's not based on scientific facts. And there are some things that have been determined later that by increasing the amounts of, for example, folic acid, that the incidence of spina bifida have virtually been eliminated by increasing the vitamin in prenatal capsules above the initial recommended daily allowances. So the research of Dr. Pottinger should be taken into your mind as important, and to use this information to improve your personal and family health. With that, I will end this lecture and hope that you have got some new knowledge that you will apply and improve your health while decreasing healthcare costs.
Sorry, my mic was muted. I was listening to the video earlier today while I was getting ready and kind of working in my office. And I've heard some of it before in different things with Bruce Lipton talking about some of the epigenetic stuff. And then more recently, I have several friends with diabetic issues. And that seems to be a rising trend in the US and I guess probably around the world. I had a question for you about the and if you guys have questions in the live chat, please put those in all caps so that I can share them on the screen and share them with Dr. McDaniel. When you were talking about the when food is being cooked, that it no longer is an electron donor, is that kind of like it's not able to transfer energy anymore? Can you expand on that a little bit more? What's the significance of it not being an electron donor?
Raw food has more energy and it's more tendency to be in the reduced state of chemical molecules. And in the reduced state, each electron carries a little quanta of energy, and the opposite of being reduced is to be oxidized, that the 21% oxygen that's in our atmosphere replaces the electron and you get oxidation. A good example of that everyone knows is rust, how steel can rust. And I use as an example of rancid butter or rancid peanut butter or different foods. The oxygen has slowly reacted. Now, heating increases the rate of all chemical reactions. So when we're cooking food, we're actually speeding up the oxidation, and this makes some food more tender as they give it up. But you're really getting into what we talk about. I have a new biochemistry book that treats the biochemistry of life in a little different fashion than I've ever read before. it was always talking about the different molecules and compounds. This book talks about the energy that is in different molecules and compounds. And when I put up the chart of the composition of matter with all approximately 100 elements, there's absolutely no life properties in any of those little boxes of stable energy. And the amount of energy in each compound is by the number of electrons that are circulating around nuclear mass in the center of that element. And to cook food, you reduce the number of electrons, or the reduction state, and move it toward the oxidized state, or in more common terms, makes it more rancid, though we can't tell that. But that's what's happening when you increase this process by heating. And so the bottom line of what we're talking about is that Dr. Pottinger proved with an animal that can eat both meat and vegetables, a carnivorous cat, omnivorous cat, that they are healthier. And as I say in the video that comes from that foundation, it was upsetting at the end, after they tell the story, which I was sharing with you today, that in the United States, we are going right down the path of the type B cats, that everything was that they ate was cooked thoroughly. And we need to think about that in terms of trying to improve our health, because more French fried franchise food is not as healthy as having at least, as they recommended, between 40 and 50% of your food should be raw. And that includes, oranges, grapefruit, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, and I'm trying to think of some vegetables that we can eat raw, like carrots, celery. We need to have 40, 50% of our diet raw. And the molecules are in a reduced state, that when you go into the metabolism of being hooked together to make the bioactive compounds that run the process of life, which is quite remarkable that our cells can take elements that totally lifeless, and in this process of cellular synthesis under the control of the genes, creates the process of life. And that same thing goes on in plants. The minerals in the soil are totally lifeless, but that plant with its cells in plant cellular synthesis takes these lifeless molecules. Eureka, one of the strangest mysteries of how this all got started that has faced mankind. Even in the archaeological records, you can tell that human beings realize something mysterious is going on, and all types of theories have come of this, but the most prevailing one is that there is a creative, organizing, designing power active in the universe that is the source of this. And I can tell you for sure, if you see on my behind my head here, it is not a old gray-headed man that is God. This organizing, designing, creating process seems to be beyond our human capacity to think and understand of all the wonders that are present in biology and botany in the plant and animal kingdom. And since we don't have very many questions, you saw there at the end, I probably tried to anticipate some questions.
Oh, okay.
And some examples that maybe people would have if we were really interactive. And so it made it a little longer than usual, but I tried to anticipate some of the questions.
Yeah, you had great information on the video as well. I think people are asking a couple questions. Nancy was asking, what are some of the top raw foods we should be eating? I remember I believe it was last week when we were going over some of the ingredients in New Eden and the benefits of those. You talked about blueberries and how super antioxidant and all the benefits of those. I would think that's one of the top foods we should all be eating raw. What are some of the others that you would recommend?
Well, salads, the lettuce, celery, and tomatoes, and mushrooms that don't have to be cooked is a way to increase it, along with eating grapefruit, oranges, tangerines, peaches, pears, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries.
So all of that you're mentioning fruits and vegetables. When they're talking about raw food and the cats, I thought they might even be talking about serving the cats meat
Well,
raw.
that
Did they also serve the cats meat?
they served one group of cats
Hmm.
uh, raw meat and
Okay.
different parts of animals that were listed there. And in group B, they didn't get anything that wasn't thoroughly cooked. And
Okay.
cooking oxidizes or reduces electrons in the food. And when it's taken into cellular synthesis, it's debased and does not have the properties of that are put in it in nature, I guess you would say.
Hmm.
Uh, anyway, that's
Very interesting.
very
Yeah.
practical. It doesn't cost a lot of money
Hmm.
to eat more food raw. And I grew up incredibly poor for this kind of society we're in. And so I probably have a over biased thing of trying to find economical ways to exist. And one of the big costs of living is food.
Yeah.
And sometimes, in some people, even a bigger cost is their medical expenses. And by this, you can truly prevent disease. And just like in the preamble to the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act that founded the dietary supplement industry, the first paragraph says science and medicine has found that optimal nutrition is essential for good health, to prevent disease, and to restore health. And I always follow that with, what more would you want? Well, I can tell you right quick what you'd want. You'd want that to be law instead of just in the
Yeah.
preamble, which is a statement of why hearings were held, and they even considered passing this legislation. And unfortunately, in the labeling section of this law, which is enforced, it states that only a government approved or FDA approved pharmaceutical drug can be represented or claimed to treat or cure a disease or syndrome or correct an abnormal condition. So that's why I keep harping on this is
Right.
normal nutrition to support normal biochemistry,
Function.
normal physiology. And in this state, the body gets the benefits of that statement in the preamble.
Right.
And
Yeah,
this,
the body then can heal itself from those other things, but we're looking at supporting normal function for a healthy body and healthy way of life. So,
and if you notice, I've mentioned before, I am not wearing a tie most of the time, trying to be just like the people looking at this. I'm just a
yeah.
common person, your messenger and servant, not a medical expert, because I feel like during this pandemic, more and more people are aware that your experts frequently are relying on theory, in theory, for this morning on what they know versus tonight or tomorrow or last year or next year can change. We've heard a lot of this. What we've been talking about is theorem. And theorem is the way something was 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, last year, today, and will be tomorrow. Nutrition, optimal nutrition. And in this case, 40 to 50% of it has been proven
Yeah.
to be more healthy and giving your cells food in a state that's in the reduced state and has more energy once it's been put in a compound, and moves our body toward the normal zone, or as the father of human physiology, Dr. Hans Selye, called this balance in all our cells, which he calls the state of homeostasis. That's what it's all about. And I hope this is helpful and it's practical and it's economical. And the most important thing, it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can see that with the testimonies on the website and from people's experience that I've engaged with, and from myself, my own experience. So, and that's what I'm looking for, is to, lead a healthy, happy life that's fulfilled and that I can share with other people that I love and care about. So that's my motivation for being involved in this. Nancy Iceland says, what happens when we pray over our food? We talk a lot about frequency and put an energy exchange. Do you have any theories or theorems about praying over your food?
You've touched another subject, is almost another series of lectures.
Well, we could do a whole show about it another time if you want, but
what I wanted to tell you is that we have a physical organ between our ears called the brain. The function of the brain is mind and spirit, the thinking, cognition process of manipulating knowledge that we've learned and remembering. Well, the function of the brain controls everything in the body, physically, emotionally, mentally. And the best book that I can recommend that I think is in lay language is entitled Secrets of Aboriginal Healing. And it's a story of a physicist, a nuclear physicist that got multiple sclerosis. And he was told he was going to die within 2 years because he was already down to a wheelchair and had no quality of life. And in this book that you've got there is that it's by Gary Holtz and his wife, Robin Holtz. I don't want to go too much about the book, but just by going to Australia, being in a hut over there, and interactions, working with the mind. And my oldest son was just here this last week and was reading a book about the power of meditation. And the meditation is part of, in the realm of prayer that you were talking about, because when you think positively and constructively, it's good for the body, not only the physical body, but the emotions and the mental state. And you should, as I frequently say in my lecture, what you think and believe, and that's one of the things, the reason I'm doing this with you, these lectures, is what you know, think, and believe is extremely powerful. And you need to be careful about what you think and believe, because if you believe the wrong things, it can be deleterious to your physical health as well as your mental and emotional health. So prayer, which is positive and looking beyond yourself, asking for help from whatever this source is that is creative, organizing, designing in the universe, that all the various societies at one time or another have developed some system of trying to pull this power or this energy, like we're talking about energy in the food, but this mental energy into constructive activity in the physiology and biochemistry of the body. And prayer and meditation is powerful because it works with the function of the brain in positive terms. Is that a fair response? I had a question there about dermatomyositis. I can tell you that in lupus that we have had astounding and arresting responses in some people that have particularly gone to more comprehensive nutrition, like is available in New Eden, that is built around the extremely active ingredient that was extracted by researchers for Carrington Laboratory that is in aloe leaf gel, which is acetylated mannose. For short, we call it Ace Manning. And I also want to say I like to under promise and over deliver. So I'm not going to tell you by any means everybody's going to get a good response. In fact, is the only thing that I have found 100% is death, taxes, and scoundrels will run for public office and get elected. Those three things are 100%. And there's always those people because of their past. Every person's genes are a little different. There's no one living today that has the same pattern of genes that has ever lived and died or probably will ever be born, which is a complex thing to point out. But it's the science has been done to set the scene for survival of the fittest by the breadth of genetic selection that goes into the process of creating a new human being. And with that, I would say it won't hurt you. This is food. Your drugs and pharmaceuticals that are used for dermatomyositis and lupus interfere with engineering and design of life. I was asked as a consultant to go to Europe twice by a company in London when they were creating the new drug and supplement laws for the European common market. I never got to appear before the big group, but I did the English group that were members of it. And I pointed out that the man-made chemicals that we call pharmaceuticals interfere with the engineering and design of life by substituting for molecules, stimulating, suppressing, altering the engineering and design of life to reduce symptoms. And an ideal drug for a pharmaceutical company is, as long as you take the drug, you suppress those symptoms. But if you quit taking the drug, they'll come back. So you go back to the drug. Good business. Unfortunately, it's very expensive business if it's still in patent. But what we're talking about nutrient molecules, they are used in the engineering and design of life, like this key molecule that is in the aloe plant, that in the second step of cellular synthesis called the endoplasmic reticulum, 9 molecules are used that are in 3 branches to make a domain on the membrane of every cell in your body. For what that domain does is to create harmony and balance between all the cells. All the cells have to work together just like a symphony orchestra. And as I frequently say, a good example is where you have a mutation in the genes and the cell is mutated in a manner that it's malignant. And every time it divides, it makes another malignant cell, and it's like having a revolutionary individual in a society that says we're going to change everything and take over. Well, that's what cancer does. It doesn't respect the other cells, and it doesn't work in harmony with the other cells, and it tries to get the nutrition. It builds up waste material. Physically, it pushes like, man, it can really cause havoc in the brain because just the physical activity of this growth interferes with the function of the brain. But the same thing happens in other parts of the body. Well, incredibly, in the design of our genes, there are sequences that say basically search for abnormal cells. Find these abnormal cells and attack and get rid of them. And it takes nutrient molecules to make these bioactive molecules to do these steps. And that's why we see such incredible benefits in restoration of health with more comprehensive nutrition. And it's even better if you have about 40 to 50% of your diet that hasn't been cooked.
Sorry about that. We're moving that direction. We're working with the community to bring education and resources to everybody because we want to, this is the opportunity. This is the time in our community, in the world, where we can build new things and start when you are in a situation that you don't like, then look for something, look for the light, look for the new bright things, build something if it's not there. And so I'm so thankful that I found you and found the resources with New Eden. And I just want to share it with all of my community. So you guys check out the description below. There's a link in the description for you to order. If you do get on a subscription, there's a discount for it. And this month there's a special reduced price when you subscribe, and also a free book with your subscription. So Dr. McDaniel, we will see you again back here next week, and we'll talk about more amazing stuff with New Eden and the nutritional benefits of having.
Well, let me end with that statement when you ask about prayer.
Yes.
The bottle of New Eden, it states here, after telling you all this science, never take this nutrition with an empty spirit.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about, the positive aspect of what you know and think and believe. Never take it with an empty spirit.
I love it. You guys heard it here. Make sure your spirit's full. Take care.